Well, hello to all of our podcast followers. Welcome again to Did You Know? It's our show where we just will unravel a lot of information for you so that we can also have a little touch of humor in it. I'm Yolanda, and today I'm going to be your host, guiding you through the fascinating world of law, just a little bit of law. And so we have with us joining us today our distinguished guest, our solicitor for both Richland and Kershaw County, Mr. Byron Gipson. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are really looking forward to the information that we can share with our community. I know a lot is happening in your arena, and we just want to be able to share with our listeners and with the community of things that will keep us abreast. So again, did you know? Sit back, relax, and we'll just learn some information from our esteemed guest. Thanks again for joining us. So, Mr. Byron Gipson, I'm sorry, I'm trying to call you by your full name here, Mr. Gipson.
No, and please know, Byron, we've known one another for a long time.
I'll try to do that. So tell us again, how did you get started in law, and what made you decide to run for the solicitor for both Richland and Kershaw counties?
Sure. When asked that question, I have to think back a little bit. I've always known that I couldn't keep my mouth shut sometimes. And so I've always enjoyed advocating for folks who I didn't feel had a voice or whose voice was being walked on or trampled over.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a kid, even as I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, things kept steering me back to the legal realm. And so as I graduated from Drea High School in '89, I'm actually was a double major at one point, thinking that, med school and pre-law was where I was going.
Really?
Yeah, until I took biology, 105, which was that one that is more constructed or geared towards folks who are going to med school. And I realized that was not going to be where the Lord was going to be leading.
Right. Quickly,
very quickly. When I first took that first set of exams, I owed points.
Wow.
And they started knocking on the door now to come get me back. With some of the points over from that first couple exams.
Wow.
But I always had a love for public speaking, had a love for advocating, and that started to push me towards just wanting to go to law school.
Very good. Well, we are glad that you decided to do it. We're glad to have you as an advocate.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we want to learn just a little bit about what the solicitor office is doing, or just tell us a little bit about the different things that you do there and how you help the community.
Sure. So first, sometimes folks get a little confused by the term solicitor.
Mm-hmm.
Solicitor is the district attorney. And so in these legal shows that you watch, you hear the DA, the district attorney, the state's attorney. That's my role. That's what I do. And so I'm the DA for Richland and Kershaw counties.
Okay.
It's the exact same thing. We just call it something different in South Carolina. So as a solicitor, we have two offices, like I said, Richland and Kershaw County, and between the two, about 40 lawyers. And those are assistant solicitors who work on just an array of different matters and different cases that come to the office.
Okay.
So now repeat your question before I start.
No, I was just asking you about the role of the solicitor
Sure.
and how it could benefit or would benefit the county, the different counties that you're serving. Now, one thing that you did mention is about the number of attorneys that you have there. It was one of the questions I wanted to ask in reference to that. There are oftentimes a lot of people I know that may not have the funds for representation. How does the office, or what do you do to help those individuals who may need to have that advocate but yet don't have the funds?
Sure. So what happens in our realm? So matters that come to me are generally going to be felony matters, so the more serious matters that happen in Richland and Kershaw County. And so if a person is charged with a crime, and the way it works is law enforcement will make the arrest. And then once the arrest is made, those cases are passed on to us. If they're misdemeanor cases, meaning, speeding tickets, simple fights, assault and battery, third degree, and some of the, when I say lesser, I don't mean lesser in importance, but they're not felonies. Those matters go to what's called magistrate's court, or some people call it small claims court, but those are handled in magistrate's court. General sessions matters are ones that primarily my office handles. So if a person is charged with a crime that's a felony, which generally means you can have if convicted, you'd be receive a year or more in jail or a fine of $1,000 or more. If it's one of those types of matters, then it will come to our office. Immediately, a person should be screened for a public defender. So what happens is if they're arrested, if they end up at the detention center, there is a public defender's office right there. And they will have an opportunity to be screened for an attorney to see if they can afford an attorney. So if a person cannot afford, and well, my office has no say so on that. That's just based on what the statute says. Depending on how much income a person makes, then that will determine whether or not they are a public defender is accessible or eligible to them. If they are, then the public defender will take that case and work with them immediately. If not, they'll need to hire a private lawyer.
Okay. So then who determines whether or not, I know that there's a screening process, but where does that process lie? Who determines whether or not this person is eligible to have free representation?
Yeah, what will happen is that can happen right there at the magistrate's court, because there's an affidavit that they'll fill out and there's some information that they have to provide. But if for some reason they do not have a lawyer by the time something that we call a first appearance takes place, then a judge will at that point conduct kind of an inquiry with them on the record. It's the technical hearing is a Ferretta hearing, and at that point in time they'll determine if they qualify, and if so, then they have to at that point go apply and have a public defender appointed to assist them with the case.
Okay, great. So that probably answers my other question. I was going to ask, how do you or your office, if at all, how do you engage with the community to understand the legal needs and the concerns of the community?
Sure, and that's one way. I mean, one of the things I have to tell people all the time. I mean, when you watch these legal shows, generally people just look up and they're saying, "All right, here's a prosecutor," and they're there to send people to jail. That's not entirely true. Our job.
So law and order and all that law and order.
That's one aspect of what they do. Yeah, that's right. It's a good show, but that's only one aspect of what we do. But frankly, the oath that we take, our job is to be ministers of justice. And so what that means is we're gatekeepers. And so if there's a case that we look at and say, you know what, this does not meet the elements, it wasn't properly done, or something improper happened during the arrest, then it's incumbent on us to dismiss the case, get rid of it, end it right there. And so we have the ability in our office to dismiss cases that are improperly brought. We have the ability to divert cases. So there's situations where something minor took place, and again, when I say minor, I'm not disrespecting anybody who may have been the victim of a crime. I'm suggesting that when it relates to violent crimes and others, when I use that word minor, I'm just talking about just the meaning of if it's a property crime and that qualifies for maybe pretrial intervention or diversion, then there are kind of programs where a person can take responsibility for what they did. They can pay fines for what they did. They can go through community service and then have something like off the record. And so it's a second chance, but you're still taking responsibility for what you did, but you're not being dinged with the criminal offense that will track you for the rest of your life necessarily, because it's not a violent crime. It's something that qualifies for diversion programs.
Okay, so then that brings me to another question, because not oftentimes, there have been times where I would hear about these programs. They says, hey, come here today and we can expunge your record.
Right.
So what does that really mean? Does that mean it doesn't matter? I mean, is it depending on the crime itself, or what does that mean? Hey, I can wipe your record clean. And how do they go about doing that?
So I'll be wary of anybody. The only person who can wipe your record clean, it needs to come through our office. So if there are individual agencies out here saying, we'll expunge, we'll do that, you need to put that to the side, because that's not necessarily true.
Interesting.
Our office puts on expungement seminars throughout the year. So that when you talk about connecting with the community, we do that it's multiple times throughout the year. We do it at churches, community centers, and whatnot. And sometimes fraternities and sororities will call and say, hey, we'd like to do an event over at such and such spot. And so we'll agree to provide the information, because it has to come through our office to take place. And so we have a diversion program office. We have an affiliated services office, and then we have an expungement office that's all under my purview. And so we'll come out and we'll explain what expungement means, how expungement works, what charges are eligible for expungement, and that's key. Everything's not eligible. I mean, there are misdemeanors that are eligible for expungement. And so, and it'll get technical, so I won't get too technical right now. But there's a litany of things that can be expunged, and so we'll go through those that information at these seminars. And once we've gone through it, we have the ability to run rap sheets. But oftentimes, if you bring it, you can go on SLED's website and pay, I believe it's $25 or so, and get a copy of your rap sheet. And if there are certain things on there that can be expunged, we can look at those matters individually, because it's a private conversation that we have. It's not something we do in public. And go through it and determine what can come off the record and what the cost would be to do it. Because again, by statute, there's a cost that is associated with expunging matters. And then we'll go through those things and we'll assist you with those things we can expunge.
Okay, and that cost, where does the money go? Who gets that money to? Is that the county?
No, the money comes to our office because it's a service that our office provides based on statute. And so, and I'll say this: if a person has been found not guilty of a matter, that should be expunged for free. Sometimes people don't understand that. So they may have been charged with something. And even when I was in private practice, there were times when somebody could have been charged with, a fight at a football game or something like that. Or sometimes people are charged with shoplifting. They're found not guilty, and they just go along their way, just kind of living their lives, but they don't get it expunged because they just didn't realize it was on their record. And then years later, it shows that there was an arrest there. And sometimes that can encumber somebody with employment. Those are things that can be expunged for free.
Wow.
So,
I guess this is going to show how naive I can probably be then, because I was thinking that if you were found not guilty, it would not be on your record. But you're saying if you're ever charged with it, it remains on your record.
It can remain on your record.
It can remain.
You got to be diligent and just check.
Okay.
There's some municipalities that, when the law changed about 10 or 12 years ago, if you were found not guilty in court, the magistrates would hand over the information for you to sign so they could, begin the expungement process.
Okay.
But some places don't do that.
Okay.
And so if there was something that you had in your past, you may just want to double check it.
Wow. Did you know?
There you go.
Did you know that we need to make sure that we're double checking that and following through?
Worthless checks.
Yeah.
I mean, in situations where somebody bounced a check, that may be on a person's record from years ago, and it can be encumbering you and you just don't know it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you find out at the most awkward times when you don't need to see it.
That's right.
On your reports, like, okay, now I need to do all the red tape to make sure it gets off.
That's correct.
That's good to know. Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. No. And there are a lot of little kind of, that's it, and nuances to it, but those are just important things to think about. Now, the interesting thing about the society we live in now, our office can expunge matters from what's called the NCIC. That's a database, a national database that when arrests take place, information is entered into those databases. What we cannot do is take stuff off the internet. And so there are websites out there, people talk about mugshots.com and otherwise, if a person is arrested, sometimes these places pay jails or the detention centers to get a hold of those lists. And they can show that a person has been arrested. Or if it hits the news or something like that, it can be out there. We can't control that. We can only control what's in the information that's on the NCIC. And I say control, we can only work with that information and have matters expunged. They qualify to be expunged based on the law.
Okay.
But we can't get it off of the internet. We can't do those other things. And so there are employers sometimes who search those and may just do a Google search on a person's name and things can come up. And sometimes our office gets calls and says, hey, we had it expunged. They say, hey, we did our job. We can't control what other people do.
Wow, that's interesting. Right. Now, you also mentioned earlier about classes that you offer to, I guess, different people that may have things on their record. Tell us a little bit about that.
And I'll be more so along the lines of with expungements, just kind of learning how expungements work. Sometimes people have convictions that are felonies. And so there's a distinction between misdemeanors and felonies. And so a felony conviction, we cannot expunge. So oftentimes that means if there's been some time between when the matter happened and there's a record, I say, of just kind of a person kind of turning away from whatever that situation was, then they may be eligible to have that matter pardoned. And so that goes through probation, pardon, and parole. That's not my office.
So then what is the difference between a pardon and expungement?
And expungement, then there is a difference. Expungements are matters that, again, are being cleaned off your record by law because we have jurisdiction to do it. And that's generally misdemeanors and lower level matters that we're able to take off because, number one, the law says we can, and then two, it's been a year to 3 years and maybe even longer since something has happened. and so it can be cleaned off your record.
Okay.
When it comes to pardons, those are generally felonies and more serious matters that have come through general sessions, and so we don't have jurisdiction to do that. So what happens is a person can apply, and then the Department of Probation, Pardon, and Parole has to have a hearing and determine whether or not the matter can be pardoned.
Okay.
If it's pardoned, now it would still show on your record, but you receive all of your rights, the additional rights that you may have lost as a result of a guilty plea or being found guilty.
Okay. So then, am I correct in saying that once it's expunged, it's as if it were not there?
Correct.
And once it's pardoned, it was there,
but
it's been excused.
It's been excused.
Okay.
And this could kind of lead us into another area.
Okay.
So, for instance, if a person is convicted of a felony, they're not going to be allowed to own a gun. If there's a pardon, then your gun rights are restored. In some states, not South Carolina, if a person is convicted of a felony, they may lose their right to vote. That's not the case in South Carolina. Once a person has served their sentence and is off of probation and supervision, they can vote again.
Okay.
But there are just certain rights that a person is going to be entitled to once they're pardoned.
Okay.
They can be on the jury again. They can serve jury duty, which is important because we need jurors with varied experiences who can sit and listen to the matters that happen in our county.
Okay. Now that brings me to another point. You mentioned with the felony that they would not be able to have their rights restored after they've served that time, or they will. Or with a gun, I'm sorry.
With gun rights, right.
Gun rights. Okay.
They would not have their gun rights restored with the felony, even after they've served their time, unless they've been pardoned.
Okay,
Yes.
so, and as you know, Solicitor Gipson, right here in South Carolina, even as we speak, the discussion is open carry with guns.
Yes.
So how does that, how would that affect, if it does affect anyone who's been a felony or anything? Can anyone at any point walk around and carry a gun, not having a license? Or can you tell us more about that law and how it may affect some of the felonies and all of that good stuff?
Sure. The law on its face is that if anybody 18 or older who can lawfully own a gun cannot lawfully carry a gun without a concealed weapons permit.
Even if they've been convicted?
No, they cannot.
Okay,
So
okay.
if you've been convicted and your rights have been restored by pardon or amnesty, is kind of the language that's used, then you can carry a gun. But if you have been convicted of a felony, you cannot carry a gun, even under this new law.
Okay.
Folks who can carry a gun, who can carry a gun, are now anybody over the age of 18 who can legally own a gun.
Right.
Is now allowed to carry one if they choose to.
And they do not need to have any type of training.
They do not need to have any training. Now, he didn't ask this. I'm sure we're getting to that point, but I think that training is important if you are going to carry a gun. I think one of the most dangerous things that can happen right now is to have a gun, a lethal weapon, and not have the training to carry it. Officers carry guns. They have to go through an inordinate amount of training so that they can make sure they know how to use it, they know when to use it, and they know the law behind what happens if you use it, the consequences.
Right.
Just because you have a right to do something, well, let me rephrase that. You can have a right to do something, but you have to understand that with the rights come responsibilities. And with every action, there's a reaction. So there's a consequence to actions. And so if a person, and I'm on my soapbox now.
No, go right ahead.
If you are going to carry a gun, you need to understand, number one, how to use it, what it does, what it doesn't do. You need to understand the difference between revolvers and automatics. You need to understand if it jams, what you do, how not to point it, where to point. You put the bullet, what types of bullets you need to understand it. You need to take the time, just like you would if you're driving a car,
right?
To you go get a license when you drive a car. You need to take the time to figure out how this thing works, and it's best to do that through training. And I say that because just because there's now this right to do it doesn't mean the law has changed when it relates to what's going to happen if you use it.
That's what I was going to ask you.
And so that's something that people have to understand. If you have a gun and you pull that gun out, you are now susceptible to even if you were illegally carrying, you were susceptible to what happens as a result of you pulling that gun. And if you're wrong, there's I watch my language.
Yeah.
There's an array of consequences that are out there that will land you in front of our office.
So is your office looking at doing, I guess, installing any type of new rules, or is this new law going to change the way you all operate in your office at all? And if so, can you share how?
It's going to have to. This just went into effect last week, and so I mean we're assessing. We're assessing right now because it's going to change. This new law will change the way the law enforcement is able to approach people. I mean, just because a person has a gun on the hip before, the question had to be, do you have a concealed weapons permit? Show me that permit while you're carrying it. If they weren't, then they could be charged with unlawful carrying a pistol. Now, unless there's some type of reasonable suspicion that there's some type of criminal activity taking place, that question may not be able to be asked. And so that now changes the way that those interactions take place. But more concerning to me is that we're already in a time where we have kind of a heightened sense of our skin is a lot thinner than it used to be. We get mad a whole lot quicker. We get irritated more quickly. We don't offer grace to people like we used to. And so whereas you ride in traffic, somebody cuts you off. You may look over. You may say some words under your breath. You may say something to them. There may be a gesture here or there, and then it's over. But now that people are, things can escalate so quickly. Things that may have just been, a simple fight, a couple words getting passed back and forth, somebody getting pushed. Now if a gun is accessible, people may start making decisions that can forever change the trajectory of their lives and their families' lives. Again, I think the training is crucial. I think that if you're going to carry, you really you got to know what the consequences are if you pull that gun, because oftentimes, and people will say, well, I was defending myself. Well, what the average person thinks is self-defense is not the legal definition of self-defense. And one of my fears is that people, will talk about standing their ground and doing certain things because that's what they hear. That's what they may have done some Google search and seen, certain things that, what the law is or isn't. But, we know what the law is. And I'm just a believer the best way to avoid a punch is not to be there. And so if you can just be careful carrying. I implore you, be careful if you're going to carry, be careful doing that. Know what the rules are, know what the law is, because there's an old saying, ignorance of the law is not a defense. And just because a person thinks they understand the law, they think they were threatened, they felt threatened at a point in time, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the law that the law is going to support them. And I fear that we're going to see an influx of cases where with well-intentioned people, good people who may have made a split-second decision that was poor and hurt somebody with the gun that we may not have seen 5, 10, 12 years ago.
Well, I'm hoping, I'm praying that there will be some classes that, that will help. More thought will go in behind now that it's a law or becoming a law. And what is it that we can do to protect ourselves and, protect the community as much as possible? I know it's, there's an array of things that we probably need to consider. And I'm just hoping that we will in those places we need to consider that.
There will be classes. Classes will be offered. They're now free classes. It's going to take the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division just a few months to kind of get everything situated because it's a new law. But classes are offered. So take the classes. If you're going to carry, take the classes. If you're 18-year-old, and I got 18-year-old, I think we won't even go. But if your children are going to carry, if they're going to have them, they need to take the class. It will be free at this point. Take the class. It is worth it. Learn how to handle the gun, learn the laws behind it, and learn what your rights and responsibilities are, because there are more responsibilities that come with being able to carry this gun.
Right. Yes. And thank you so much, Solicitor Gipson. I want to give you, we only have a few more moments left.
It goes quick.
So it does. But I want to give you an opportunity to tell us how we, the community, can assist you in your office or any other things that you want us to know that we may not know about a solicitor's office.
Sure. I'd say just a few things. Assisting us. One thing that you can do to assist us is just be involved in what's going on. Understand what the laws are. Understand what's going on in communities. And when you're having community meetings, if there's something that you have a question about what the law is, and we're only talking about the criminal aspect, you can let us know. We can have somebody come and talk on that point for a little bit so we can educate you. Oftentimes things happen and people assume that, well, all the prosecutors say you control this and you control that. And that oftentimes is not true. But the more that you learn about how these processes work, I mean, if there are laws that are out there that you think are incorrect or that you don't like, or you think there need to be laws, then let's talk about how you can advocate with your legislator, because the legislators enact the laws, change laws if necessary. And the only way that happens is if their constituency votes and talks to them and explains to them what's important. So understanding kind of the role that each of us has in this system, and then and one of those roles requires voting. Another one requires being educated on what the law is so that we can make the proper decisions about what we do and how we handle things.
Right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your sacrifice, your time, and all that you do for Richland and Kershaw County.
Sure.
Again, we want to thank each of you for stopping by. We hope that you learned something that you did not know today. We want you to want all of us to become more involved in our communities, getting out there, talking with our legislators, getting the proper laws enacted so that we too can be a part of a community that we're all glad to be of. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Did you know?